Can you talk to me a little bit about how the differences between like a Silicon Valley where I'm at right here and
Yep.
the startup community in China? I'm super fascinated to hear if you have an opinion on what the main differences are. I mean, is it such that here where the VCs like do VCs play a huge role in China, or is it other influencers or other like are there more accelerators? Do you know kind of the differences between both cultures?
Yes. So there's a couple of differences. I would say the first one is just the sheer scale of resources. I mean, China, just as a country, is so much bigger, so much more people, so much more money to deploy. So that's the first difference. Secondly, the role of the
When you say
government.
money to deploy, you mean just investments in general, just pure capital, like chasing these deals?
Exactly, pure
Okay.
capital. I mean,
Yep.
total amount of venture capital went down obviously over the last quarters.
Yep.
Um, however, however, the money in the system in general, and I think the reason why it went down is because it was just too hot. I mean, there was just the VC scene in China is a very young one. They're not super experienced. Deals are pretty straightforward, and you don't have different kinds of contracts and participation schemes as you have in the US.
Hmm.
Um, and so they still have a lot to learn. And now it's the first time that kind of this market cooled down a little bit, which I do
Yeah, yeah.
think is
Which is
healthy.
needed. Which is needed. Yeah.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So that's the one thing, the sheer scale of resources. The second thing is obviously the role the government plays, because here you have an authoritarian capitalism as opposed to what we have in the West. So you need to always take the government into account, especially if you plan to build an empire. If you don't plan to stay small and in a niche. The third thing is the mindset of the typical Chinese consumer. The Chinese consumer is very open to giving away their privacy, their data, so they don't care whether you take their data as long as some benefits arise from that.
Mm.
So if you do a survey in Germany, it's like 10% of people are willing to give away their data if they get some benefit from it. Here it's like it's the majority. People just don't care.
95%. Yeah, or so. Yeah.
And so so that's another thing. And then maybe the fourth thing to close with is, based on these three factors, things like um, lean startup, or things like design sprints
Hmm.
and methodologies that came from the West,
Hmm.
and people try to adopt them in China, they usually don't work.
Mm.
Even things like in the West, you always say you need to pick like a niche, you need to pick one narrow vertical and conquer that one and then go on to the next one.
Mm.
Even things like that are not totally applicable. You have many cases of startups and companies here that go super broad in the beginning
Interesting.
and manage to conquer multiple verticals at the same time, and somehow find to manage to um, create synergies between those.
Mm.
So it's a very different ecosystem.
Yeah, I wonder. And so, in terms of accelerators and VC funds, and are there traditional funds like you have here in the U.S. in terms of limited partners, the LP GP structure? Are there similar things in China that are where there's these massive VC funds with 10 billion equivalent of USD that go out and make 100 investments across SaaS software, for example? Is it similar in that sense?
Yeah, I would point out three main differences, because the most things are similar, but some
Hmm.
things are different. So it's a little bit faster. So that means the general, like the duration of a fund will usually not be 10 years, but might be shorter, 6 7 years.
Okay.
That's normal for Chinese VC funds.
Hmm.
Second thing is, you always have RMB funds and you have USD funds. And
Hmm.
that's important to know for founders from abroad who seek to get funding, is if the VC firm you're talking to only has an RMB fund, then it might actually be pretty difficult for them to give you funding, because they need to go through a lot of legal loopholes to give you that money. However, it's much easier if they have an USD fund.
Interesting.
That's
So
the second
they
thing.
kind of raise, they can raise in two denominations basically in their
Hmm.
currency, and it's helpful
Yeah,
if you're an outsider kind of coming in. Okay, so that's interesting. Okay, and then sorry, your last difference.
exactly. And then the last difference is, you have if you talk to people at VC firms, some of them might be called, investment manager, um, or so. Let's pick an investment manager, for example. In reality, they are not. In reality, they are probably on the associate level.
Hmm.
But in China, talking about those roles, you can kind of always deduct one position. So I have some friends from startup founders who approach VC firms. And are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Sorry,
now I can hear you.
we lost you for a second, but yeah, I heard everything. So you were saying basically you have to deduct two positions for roles, and so somebody's a
Yeah,
manager.
basically deduct one position. So I have
Okay.
friends who are founders and who have been in touch with investment managers, and they think, oh, this guy has decision competence, like he has decision power, but in fact, he or she is just the one, doing the screening. So that's something sometimes disappointing to people talking to Chinese VC firms.
Interesting. Okay, that's great to know.